Do you know the difference between courage and bravery? Did you know that there's 8 different kinds of courage? Do you want to be more courageous in a certain area of your life? Well, if any of those questions seem interesting to you, join me today on Boldly Driven Conversations with Bree. We're going to be talking about courage and how to be more courageous and the different types. Join me. Okay, so courage, what is courageousness? Having courage and being brave. What's the difference? So courage is the ability to face and overcome fear and difficulty. It's a strength to do what is right, even when it's hard and it's really scary. It's morals based. It's often associated with bravery, but it's more than that. It's the strength to persevere through difficulty and take difficult risks where the outcomes of those risks are uncertain. Okay. Bravery is the differences between the two. So bravery is impulsive, whereas courage is a conscious choice. Bravery is like that split moment decision. There's no thinking about it. It's just going and doing something. Bravery doesn't have fear. Bravery lacks fear. That's why it's spontaneous and it's just happens. It's, momentary, impulsive. It doesn't require any planning or thought to it. It's absolutely fearless. Rather than with courage is being mindful of the risks and involves you being afraid, having fear. It involves fear. Bravery is very strength-based, based on physical and or emotional strength to get through something. Whereas courage is very virtue-based, moral-based, and it's rooted in your principles, values, compassion, and kind of a sense of duty and honor. So those are kind of the differences between the two. There are lots of similarities, but I would say that's where they diverge. That's where there's like a difference between being brave and having courage. Because when we have courage, that means we're doing something afraid. We're doing it despite fear, despite unknowns, despite risks. We're doing it anyway, even though we're completely aware. It involves awareness, courage. Whereas bravery doesn't necessarily include awareness of all the risks. It's just doing. It's impulsive. So those are the differences. Now, there's been this meme going around about the 6 different kinds of courage. And one of my coworkers actually posted about it. And that's what kind of sparked me talking about this, because I was like, yeah, there are 6, but I'm thinking of 2 more. So I believe that there's actually 8 different kinds of courage. And I want to talk about those. And then we'll talk about how we can cultivate more courage. So the first kind of courage is physical courage. It's the one that oftentimes gets interchanged with bravery. Physical courage is when we keep going with resiliency and balance, and it requires awareness. Like we are aware that we might not be able to lift this thing or do this thing physically, that there are going to be obstacles, and it requires absolute awareness. This is that physical courage that is required of us to complete a task or to do something that is risky, and to keep going and not give up, to actually persevere, and build resiliency. The second kind of courage is social courage. So this means to be yourself, to be authentically yourself, unapologetically. So we're our authentic self. That means we don't compromise our values. We don't compromise our morals, and we just show up as we are. And that is the certain kind of social courage that is required of us to be genuine, to be real, to actually grow, and to actually have deep relationships with people that are real and honest and true. That's the only way you can have a really deep relationship with someone, is by having this social courage of just being yourself unapologetically. Why am I having such trouble with that? Then there is moral courage. So moral courage is doing the right thing, even when it's uncomfortable, even when it's unpopular, even when you might be ridiculed for it. It's doing the thing that is based on your values. It's doing the thing that is part of your moral principles, that even though everybody else is doing the opposite, you're going to go the opposite way, and you're going to do the thing because of moral responsibility. I think we're on the fourth one. The fourth one is emotional courage. So emotional courage is something we talk about quite a lot. And this is feeling all of your feelings, both positive and the negatives, without any guilt or attachment. No shame, no guilt, no attachment. They're just our feelings, and we get to feel them. And we're not going to put attachment to it, meaning that we're going to feel this thing and now we own it. Like, we're not going to own, especially negative feelings. We're not going to own the grief. We're not going to own the anger and the bitterness, and frustration and fear. We're not going to own those things. Those are just feelings that we feel. This is having emotional courage. Actually sitting with our feelings, actually feeling through our feelings fully takes absolute courage, especially those negative feelings. Because if you have been hurt before, if you have experienced these negative feelings before, and they're coming at you, knowing they're coming and experiencing them again and again and again and sitting in them takes courage, because it hurts. It hurts. And we don't want to be uncomfortable, and we don't want to hurt. But the good thing about it is that we know that we're going to grow from it. We know that we're going to be more. We know that we're going to be stronger, and that we're building resilience and more awareness of who we are and who we get to be, as we are building more emotional courage. Then the fifth one is intellectual courage. So this is where we learn and we unlearn, and then we relearn, having an open and flexible mind, having a mind that allows new ideas, having a mind that can see different perspectives. Having intellectual courage means that we change our minds, that we are willing to see another person's point of view and find the validity in it, and even possibly accept it for ourselves as, this is fact, this is true, this is something that I need to change my mind about. This takes a lot of courage. Intellectual courage is difficult for us because it's really difficult for us to admit when we're wrong. So when we have intellectual courage, it says, I don't know everything, and I could be wrong, and you might be right, and I have something to learn from you. And this oftentimes is very difficult for those of us who are older, maybe mentoring younger people, because we think we should know way more than younger people. You know, I'm going to be 44 tomorrow, and there are so many things that I have learned from like 20-year-olds and even teenagers, my teenagers, that I've learned. And for me to be able to say to them, you know what, I was wrong, that takes intellectual courage. And I think that there's such importance, specifically in our world right now, for us to have intellectual courage and be able to say I am wrong, and to admit that is special. That's really special. So if you are participating in that and you have that kind of courage, bravo, because there are so many people in our world who do not. And then the sixth one is spiritual courage. This is where we live with purpose. This is where we live from our values for a purpose. We talked about this yesterday, where our values and our purpose aligns. And it's a very heart-centered approach, not mind-centered or gut-centered. It's the heart-centered approach to life and other people and to ourselves, meaning we give compassion to others and grace to others and to ourselves. It means that we can be wrong. It means that we can change our minds. It means that we feel. It means that we believe in something more than ourselves, bigger than ourselves, and that we don't have to have control of everything. It's about flow. It's about living in flow. The seventh courage, and this was one that was not listed on this meme that's going around, is creative courage. And as someone who's a creative person, I realized that it takes a lot of courage sometimes to be creative, to share your creativity, to express yourself in a certain way, even though you may be rejected, and even though the thing that you're thinking of and this new idea that you have that you're using your creativity for might fail. Having creative courage means that there's uncertainty and there's a certain kind of risk and experimentation that is required so that we can live in the uncomfortability of these new ideas that we have and share them with people, even if we're going to be rejected. It takes a lot of courage to share, if you're an artist, to share your art. If you're a writer, to share your writing, to share the creativity. Even doing like these videos takes creativity. And sometimes it's difficult. It's difficult to put yourself out there. Having creative courage is what the great artists of the world have done. They're the innovators, people who are courageous with their creativity. So that's the seventh. The eighth one is one that I've been exploring a little bit lately, and it's really gotten me. I have more questions than answers, but the existential courage. And this kind of courage is very special because this kind of courage requires the ability to face the fundamental questions and the anxieties that come with our human existence. The uncertainty, and to face these things, these questions and these anxieties with honesty and openness, and to confront the realities of our mortality, to confront the realities of oftentimes the meaninglessness that there are in our life. I do believe that most everything has purpose in our life, or that we can utilize things that happen in our life for a purpose. We can allow it to flow. But there are things that are meaningless in our life. I used to believe that everything was a spiritual experience. And I still tend to fall into that. But I think that there are things that are meaningless. And to face that, to face the meaninglessness of certain aspects of our human existence, or at least what we perceive as being meaningless, that things we don't understand, right? That's what we tend to mark as meaninglessness. And this is where I'm still exploring this idea. But to have the courage to explore that, to be honest about it, to be honest about our not knowing and not understanding so many things that happen in our human existence, that existential courage that is required. And to then understand too the inherent responsibility that comes with being human, the inherent responsibility we have to others, the inherent responsibility we have to ourselves, the inherent responsibility we have to make our life meaningful and to have purpose in our life. And to face all that, and to face the failure that oftentimes comes with that, to face the void. There are times in our life where we feel that absence of meaning. We have to acknowledge that we have to find it within ourselves sometimes. And to find that we don't know what we don't know. And to embrace that uncertainty and be comfortable with it. And not only just be comfortable with it, but to take responsibility for it. Radical responsibility in authenticity. And it also, this existential, as I'm exploring this existential courage, what it means to have existential courage, is to also comfortably exist alone in our own experiences and not have to have the validation from other people, and to just exist as yourself, for yourself, without receiving affirmation from others. And that has been a huge area of growth for me. And it's been something that has really built courage in me to do things that I didn't think I could do on my own. So then the question becomes, so those are our 8 different kinds of courage, right? So maybe you're sitting here and you're like, Brianna, that's great. I'm not courageous at all. I don't identify with any of those, or I do identify with some, but there are some that I want to have more courage in. Maybe I want to have more social courage. Maybe I want to have and explore this existential courage, or maybe I need to have more intellectual courage. Maybe I need to be more open. So how do we cultivate more courage in our life? How do we build it? How do we become more courageous so that we can have more resilience and get through life, not just surviving, but thriving? Because that's what we want to do. We want to live a life where we're thriving, where we're feeling fulfilled, where we are living our purpose by our values. So how do we cultivate that courage to do those things? And the first thing we have to do is we have to embrace discomfort. We have to get out of our comfort zone. We have to do things in a calculated way that are risks. As a bold living coach, I talk about this a lot with my clients, about facing fears and what that means about facing our fears. And every time we face a fear, that means we are building resilience and we're building courage to then face the next fear. And this requires us to get out of those comfort zones, to do things and do them afraid. This requires us to have more awareness, which we build this through mindfulness. And we observe our fears without any judgment. And when we observe our fears without any judgment, this oftentimes will lessen the intensity of the fear, of the thing that we are afraid of, so that it's not overwhelming us and we get into freeze mode. We're able to fight through it. We're able to move through the fear. And that's the courage. That's the courage. That doesn't mean that we are not, when we have courage, it doesn't mean we're not afraid. It's the exact opposite. It means we're doing it afraid. The second thing that we need in order to build our courage and that resilience that's required to have courage is to build our self-belief. We have to believe in ourselves. We have to trust ourselves. This is something that I have been struggling with most of my adult life. And I feel like I'm finally making strides and I'm finally starting to get it, where I'm really starting to believe in myself. And it doesn't mean I'm cocky. It just means I'm confident. It means that I have strength in areas where I was very weak. I've built up some strength. I've built up a new muscle. I've built up a new kind of courage, in one of the 8 areas that we talked about that maybe I didn't have before. We build up our self-belief and our trust in ourselves by using our intuition. We've talked about this a lot. Knowing our values and living from our values, and visualizing our success. We visualize our success. This is such a great tool. I've talked about this before, that how one of my kids, when he's out on the baseball field, he's playing his position at first base, and he is visualizing and actually doing the movements of getting the ball and throwing the ball. He's visualizing his success of making the play. And so this is something that helps us build our courage to take the risks. You know, for my son, it's laying out flat and having the courage to go on the hard ground to make the play. It gives him the courage to do that. For us as adults, it's taking the risk to do the thing that's really hard and scary, that maybe we're not getting affirmed in, or we're visualizing that we're going to have success in this area despite failure, despite prior failure, despite prior mistakes, despite prior experiences that we have that have been negative. We are visualizing our success, and we are doing it without affirmation. But then we're giving ourselves, we build up this trust in ourselves, and we build ourselves up through positive affirmations of who we are, our identity of who we are. We speak those positive things about ourselves. I am beautiful. I am courageous. I am brave. I am smart. You know, I am all these things that I actually am. I am trustworthy. I am honest. I am authentic. I am real. I am compassionate. I deserve to be loved. I am worthy. I am valuable. I am known. I am seen. All of these things, these are positive affirmations. And when we speak these over ourselves, rather than the negative things that the world tells us about ourselves, where we're not measuring up, where we're not enough, this builds up our self-trust. This builds up our self-belief of who we are. We get to decide who we are. And this involves then the abundance that we're going to experience in our life. We become the abundance in our life. The third thing is we learn from failure. We learn from our mistakes. We embrace mistakes. We don't just say, oh, I made a mistake. We embrace that mistake, and then we analyze the setback. We analyze it and we learn from it. This is part of our becoming. This is part of our unbecoming. This is part of that learning and unlearning and relearning things that we have forgotten. This is about that radical responsibility of building perseverance and owning our mistakes, owning the things where we were wrong. And oftentimes, the fourth thing we need to do to cultivate more courage is we need to have community. We need to seek support. We need to involve ourselves in mentorship, have someone mentor us that we are inspired by, who we feel is super courageous, someone we see as a role model for what we want to achieve in our life, how we want to be in our lives. Sometimes maybe this means joining a support group. If there's something in particular that we're facing that requires courage from us, you know, it's finding a supportive group of people that are going through similar challenges and learning from them and sharing with them, being open, being vulnerable, talking to a safe person who we can talk about these vulnerabilities and things that are fears. We can talk about our fears, because when we talk about our fears in a constructive way, this brings less intensity to them oftentimes. Kind of goes along with that mindfulness of being self-aware, by feeling through our feelings and acknowledging them without attachment, shame or guilt or attachment. We can reduce the intensity of those fears. And then I think the last thing that really helps us cultivate courage, and I've kind of already hit on a little bit, is gratitude. When we have gratitude, when we are focused on the positive, when we are living out of abundance rather than lack, and we live out of abundance by having gratitude for what we already have, what is before us, what we are in presence with right now. This allows us to strengthen that muscle of gratitude, and it inspires generosity, because when we know what we have, what we already have in front of us, and we acknowledge it and we're thankful for it and we can be grateful for it, this multiplies it. So then we're more generous, and we can be more generous, and we can live out the abundance of what we already are, rather than looking at things from the lens of lack and that scarcity mindset of not having enough or being in competition. And this allows us to be in more collaboration with others and collaboration with our values of purpose and our own self. Okay, so courage is a muscle that is strengthened over time. Courage is a muscle that is strengthened over time. We can cultivate courage. We don't have to live our lives not living courageously, not being brave, not being bold, not being our genuine, authentic self. And it requires intention. It requires us to have the intention to live and do things even when we're afraid. So your bold challenge today is, I want you to look at those 8 different kinds of courage, and I want you to rank them 1 to 8. What is the strongest courage that you have, and where is your weakest kind of courage? And I want you to take their weakest kind of courage, and I want you to be vulnerable and find someone to talk to about it. Why is this courage? What is so fearful about this thing? You know, what is it that really you are afraid of? And then the follow-up question to that is, and get really specific with what the fear is. That involves this lack of courage in this area. And then the follow-up question is how is this fear serving you? If it's not serving you in a positive way, let's change it. And if you need help doing that, please contact me for one-on-one coaching. I also do group coaching where we talk about living boldly. Always have groups going. I'm doing one right now about liminal spaces and navigating the holidays with our emotions, through our emotions. I have lots of different groups going. We can start a group. We can do workshops. We can do one-on-one coaching. Go to my website at briannageorge.com. And if you just have questions or you just need some support, please DM me or email me. Other than that, go live courageously.